It's time for the Phil Ferguson Show.
Hello, this is Phil Ferguson, and you are listening to The Phil Ferguson Show. A little later on, we're going to talk to Muhammad Syed about ex-Muslims of North America, Islam, and some other fun things. So I don't always talk about Christianity. It's just the biggest influence in the United States, where the show is from, so that's the most important thing to me. But we'll get into that a little later. Got some different variety of topics today. But before I get into my real rant, I bought a little portable, audio recording device. It's a Tascam, and I have a few conferences coming up that I'm going to try to see if I can get some kind of, like a press pass or something. I feel all official, and maybe record some people in conversations directly in real time. Well, I guess I'm always recording in real time. I'll record at the event, and then if there's some good stuff out of that, maybe I'll put that into some future shows. Because of some traveling I have coming up, there might be a few weeks and a month or two that I might skip a week or two, or I'm thinking of taking some investing topics and some old interviews and putting them up kind of like as a rebroadcast, so that I'm not dependent on doing this every week, especially if I'm on the road or something. So my real rant is something I don't normally talk about, although it's come up lately, is food. I mentioned that I went to the doctor and they said I have a fatty liver and I'm pre-diabetic and I need to do some improvements in my food choices and lifestyle and all that stuff. And this whole process is kind of pissing me off. And first of all, I want to say that anyone that sent me information, links, book suggestions, all that stuff, I thank you. I know that you care, and I'm touched, and I appreciate all the information that you've sent. And if you're thinking of sending something now, give me a little time. Don't send it now. And the thing that is wonderful is that so many people have sent me stuff, and like I said, I really do appreciate it. But with investing, I think I can come to a solution and an answer and know what the right thing to do is. And maybe that's because I have 20, 25, 30 years of experience in that area. So I think maybe I'm an expert. But with the food and the diet thing, this is kind of new to me. So I'm having trouble, getting a level of confidence in what I'm doing that I'd like to have. And part of that is because of the conflicting information. And probably, most certainly, I'm not the first person to suffer from some of these concerns. As an example, you can get a book that says you can eat all the meat, all the fat, everything you want to eat, as long as you just don't have processed sugar. Natural sugars, have a blast. Eat anything and everything you want, and it's perfectly fine. And they can cite studies, research to support this position. Then you have other people that say, no, you can't eat any fats at all. Fat's the enemy, and fat converts to fat in your body. Well, then you have other people that go back to the first guy and says, sugar converts the fat. You can eat all the fat you want. Then you have people that say it's all about vegetables. As long as you eat 100% fruits and vegetables, you can eat as much as you want without limit to calories. And not only that, it's going to make your diseases get better. Maybe it's true, and they cite studies, but it's different than the other person that is maybe true and cites studies. And there's all kinds of different ways that one can lose weight and or eat healthy and or have studies that support what they claim, and they can't all be true. And because of my other lifelong passion and experience of fighting with religion, at least with religion's thing, I say, well, if they can't all be true, it could be true. It could be possible that none of them are correct. However, with food, I'm sure there is some correct solution. And then the next thought I have is that if the correct solution is good for one person, might there be a different solution, proper diet combination for another person? Because people are different. So I have that. And I have one book that I had started reading, and I think I've just decided I cannot continue. And the person that recommended it is a listener, and I've already gone back and forth with emails, and I want to make sure that I'm perfectly clear to reiterate the point I had a couple minutes ago. Thank you so much for sending me the information, and I appreciate the concern. I really do. I'm honored to have so many wonderful listeners that know so many things about so many different things, and they come to me for one thing about investing. The book is How Not to Die, which I love the title. I was like, okay, this is direct and to the point, and it has hundreds and hundreds of citations. And the person that recommended it to me did suggest that I get the paper version, which I recommend for one of my books. So I want to make sure that I point out that I did not follow that advice, because I often don't have time to sit down and read books. I get way too bored doing that. So I almost always listen to audiobooks when I'm driving somewhere, because now I'm driving and listening to an audiobook. And so it makes it very hard to see the footnotes and do the research that I might want to do as I'm listening to the book. So those disclaimers, again, thank you to the person that recommended this book, How Not to Die. The basic premise of How Not to Die is you got to eat a lot of plants, fruits and vegetables all the way. And they may be perfectly right. That may be the solution. That may even be the best thing for Phil. I'm not saying they're wrong. What I have a problem with, at least in this book and some other books I've heard about, is how they support their positions. And I'm going to give you a couple of examples so my brain is weird. I think about things differently, and some of you may appreciate this, and some of you might think, Phil, it's just you. Okay, that's cool. I get it. In this book, How Not to Die, he cites a lot of studies. And the problem with the studies is that none of them are double-blind. They really can't be double-blind, because how does someone not know what they're eating? I mean, even if they're physically blindfolded, how do you keep someone separate for months or years and control their diet precisely and keep a blindfold on them so they can't see what they're eating? So the person who's eating the food has some information about what they're eating. So that's a problem. It's also hard for the person who is doing a study to not know what the person is eating. So that makes a potential problem. Another thing is a lot of these studies are observational, which is also less good, at least for me. And then they're short-term or they're incredibly small. The book often reports studies, observational studies, that have 10 or 12 or 15 people in them. And because of my background originally in college, I studied test design and statistical analysis for my undergraduate psychology degree. And even if you can get a statistically significant result, it may not be actually helpful because it was on 10 people. So citing those to further support your argument, in my mind, weakens your argument. It's like saying the Bible fulfills prophecy. That makes me laugh and giggle because that's such a ridiculously stupid argument. You would be more convincing in your belief by not citing that argument. And so citing a study with 10 people concerns me, and my skeptical alarm bells go off, and I can't stop them. And it makes me discount the entire book a little bit because you just had to cite something so pathetic. If you've got really good studies, just give me the really good studies, and I'll work with that. Another study that this book had, and I can't remember the compound. I think it was something out of cranberries. And they wanted to test if this compound could reduce or eliminate polyps in the colon. And so they did a study, and again, with a very small number of people, and something like 2 or 3 people showed significant reduction in polyps in their intestine, which is nice. Would 2 or 3 people have just on their own gotten less polyps. There wasn't a control group. There wasn't a placebo group. So that makes it a problem for me. Then the other thing I found out is it's something, whatever it was that was in the cranberries, and I may have the wrong fruit or vegetables, but the whole idea, I think you'll understand. You had to consume like 1,000 pounds of this one thing. And in the test subjects, they knew that they couldn't get them to eat 1,000 pounds of cranberries. So they took the essence out of the cranberries and they put it up their bum. Yes, that's right. They put it up their ass as a suppository, which is not necessarily problematic. But I'm not going to do that. I'm not going to get 1,000 pounds of whatever this was out of cranberries and daily stick it up my ass. It's just not going to happen. And so even if the test was valid, you would have to do it the same way as the test did for it to be relevant. And the author, and again, this is something, I don't have the footnote citation because I don't have the paper book, which I could go check the actual studies. But even things that the author feels compelled to say, in this case, as an example, one of the side effects experienced by a couple of people in the control group were anal fissures, which means there's a tear somewhere in the lower intestine from the repetition of putting things up your butt. So I see that as a downside. So I can't eat 1,000 pounds of cranberries. It may not work if you eat it versus putting it in the other way. And there's a side effect that might actually be worse than the benefit that you're getting. And the end result of this, according to the author, is eat more cranberries. Well, how do you get from A to B? So that's a problem. And I gave the book a pause for a couple of days, maybe even a week. And then I went back and the author had another study where he was talking about the benefits of kale. Now, first of all, I actually kind of like kale. I'm getting to the point where I'm trying to eat more and more salads, and I'm pretty sure in general that's good for me. I like kale. I actually like spinach too. The only thing leafy green that I don't really like is iceberg lettuce. That shit is nasty. I always thought you had to have iceberg lettuce when I was a kid. Probably one of the reasons I went so long never eating salads. Spinach is good. Kale is good. Other green leafy things are fine. I'm good. I can eat some salads now. Yay. But they took a protein, one protein out of kale, and tested it in test tubes. And the amount of the protein that they used, you would have to consume 100 pounds of kale per day. And they put this protein in some test tubes, and it had a beneficial result. So, first of all, since I don't have the footnote and I didn't look at the actual study, assuming I could actually get the study, I don't know if it's a good study. Let's for a moment pretend that it's a good study. Let's pretend for a moment that it actually worked and really, really, truly will work for every individual human being. Oh, except for this was done in a test tube. And so this protein has to be in your body. So you have to eat kale. And as we're going through this, I'm thinking to myself, wait a minute. I really know next to nothing about medicine and biology. Never even took a biology class. Somehow I got out of high school without that. It was all chemistry and physics and astronomy. But I was pretty sure, and I double-checked, when you consume proteins, they get broken down, almost all of it gets broken down, at least some, in your stomach. And then further on through your intestine, and the body absorbs the remnants, the pieces of the proteins, the enzymes or the individual subcomponents, and the cells grab those and make the proteins that they want to make. So the kale protein, for the most part, would never, ever, ever make it to anywhere where it's supposed to go to do what it was claimed to do in the book. And the guy writing this book is a doctor. He must know this. So why does he then use this study as an example of why you should eat kale? It may be a really good idea to eat kale. I'm not saying it's not. What I'm saying is I have a problem with the logic that was presented into the book to the point that I have to say, if this is the evidence that he has to support his position, I can't continue. So I've now decided I'm going to stop reading this book, and there's many other examples like that. I tried really hard. I'm several hours into the audiobook, and I'm sure there's wonderful studies that are cited. But when you cite wonderful studies and then have incredibly bad logical arguments, I can't function. I can't continue with that book. So there's that. So everybody pause on sending me any more links or books or diet suggestions. I'm going to find my own path and my own pace. Just in general, I'm eating way more vegetables, way more fruits, way more natural foods, things that I can identify where they came from. Significantly less meat, but I like meat. So I'm going to eat a little bit of it, but way less. I'm doing way more physical activity. And let's try this for a while and see how it goes. Anyway, so way more of that than I ever expected to talk about on the show, let alone this specific show. Some actual investing things. I've gotten some emails, and someone wanted me to go over the emergency fund. And it's something I've covered from time to time, but apparently it's been a while because time kind of flies by. I can't even imagine that we're on show, what is this, 270? So been doing podcasts for a long time. In total now, probably close to 5 to 6 years between the ones I started on. And the emergency fund is something that a lot of people have no emergency fund. They live paycheck to paycheck or month to month. And that's a problem. So you need to have that. And before you start worrying about saving for retirement, I want you to focus on making sure you have an emergency fund. And even the emergency fund can wait if you have several thousand or worse in credit card debt, paying 18, 20, 25%, because there's no point. Well, there's some benefit to having a couple of grand on hand for an emergency, even with credit card debt, but you really should focus on paying off the credit card debt, because if you suddenly need $2,000, you can always go back and pull it off the credit card again. Why pay 15 to 25% interest on money if you have money sitting in your bank? That's a whole nother topic. So the question is, how much should your emergency fund be? So when someone says an emergency fund, I'm assuming it's something at a local bank or credit union, some kind of financial institution where you could walk into and just get your hands on some money because something came up. Now, it's a weird thing because in our society today, with the ability to use credit cards and have instant access to some money, you may not need that much an emergency fund on hand. For me, probably the biggest concern for most people is losing a job. So if you lose a job and your income stops overnight, you need some money and you don't want to pull all that off credit cards. That's kind of what I'm thinking of as the emergency fund. And in that case, normally it's recommended something like 3 to 6 months of funds. So if you make $5,000 a month, and I mean $5,000 after tax, and you spend all of the $5,000, then having $15,000 to $30,000 locally in some way would be a really good idea. If you make $5,000, but if you lost your job, you could live on $3,000 a month, because out of the $5,000 you were saving and enjoying a little bit of it, and you can tighten your belt to go down to $3,000. Then you might only need $9,000 to $18,000 saved away. So you can adjust the scale up or down if you happen to make a lot more money or a lot less money, but you get the idea. And so this money is there. And sometimes people go, well, what if I need $10,000 tomorrow? It's like, well, what the hell are you doing that you suddenly need spontaneously tomorrow $10,000? We may have to talk about some of your lifestyle choices. What is putting you in this precarious situation where you need $10,000 tomorrow? So that's kind of the emergency fund. Now, where is the emergency fund invested, or is it invested? I'm okay with it sitting as cash in your checking or savings account. For some people, they create a separate account because that way they know in their mind that it's separated and they don't accidentally spend it. If that's something that you need, I know I have needed that in the past. Go ahead and do that. I'm not bothered by that. If you want to take that money and put it in some CDs, certificates of deposit at your bank or credit union, and you might make 1.6% for a 1-year CD, maybe 2 to 2.3 in a 2-year CD. And someone suggested, because this was all inspired by an email, that they use 3-year CDs and they put a third of the money in each year. And it's called laddering your CDs. And right now, you might be able to get something close to 2.5% to 3% on a 3-year CD. So 3% is more than 2, which is more than 1. And the question I often ask people is, depending on how big this amount of money is how much time and effort are you spending to make a couple of $100? If a couple of $100 means a lot to you, do it. You might make $300, $400, $500, $800 more per year by having 3% CDs versus 1% in a savings account. Cool. That's great. On the other hand, if you have more stability, for example, if you have two sources of income and you live on only one of your incomes and the other one is used for savings and or trips or whatever, and you could stop spending that extra money, if you can survive on one income, but you make two incomes, husband and wife or any other kind of couple, then you don't need necessarily as much cash on hand. If you have a job that for whatever reason is really secure and stable, maybe you don't need as much money. If for whatever reason the industry that you and your partner are both in are very volatile, maybe you want to have more than 6 months. So all that depends. Another thing is that if you have been saving and investing for a long period of time and or you're getting closer to retirement, you might have some money in the cushion, which is a broad basket of different bond index funds. Some of that you could count as your emergency money, maybe even all of it. So if you have something like $1 million portfolio and 200,000 is in the cushion, you can get those funds out in a couple of weeks, maybe less, but a couple of weeks. So maybe having only 1 or 2 months of cash on hand at your bank is enough. In retirement, I'm not opposed to having a year's worth of cash either in the bank or in the cushion, but it all depends. So that's some things that you can do with the cushion and how much you might want to make. Also keep in mind, interest rates are at historically lows. There have been times in the past where you could make 5% or more in a savings account in a bank. I don't know that we're going to see that soon, but it could happen. Another email I got is about 401ks, and the person that sent this said that they get a 4% match at their company. And so if they put in 4%, the company gives them 4%. But in the email, it had, the company only distributes that match once a year. Is this normal? Normal, it's becoming normal. More and more companies have done this. 10, 15 years ago, this was rare. No one had really thought of this idea. I'm sure someone was doing it, but there's no law requiring that they match the money every month or every paycheck or every week or whatever frequency. I'm assuming they have to make an annual match, so they do it at the very end of the year. And so the further question was, am I losing all the returns on dividends on that potential investment during the calendar year? Absolutely. You're not getting a fucking dime out of that money. So if you make 100,000 and you put in 4,000 and they put in another 4,000 during the entire calendar year, when they don't put in the 4,000, you aren't making any money on that money. And so the automatic assumption is that the company then is making the money on that money. Maybe. That would require them to be very sophisticated and figure out how to invest it. And they can't take too much risk because at the end of the year, they have to pay you. And so one of the things I talk about is that the time horizon controls what you're investing in. We have now had several years in a row where the market's gone up and companies might be convinced, deluded, that investing this money in the market's a good idea. But if you get a year where the stock market goes down 37%, like calendar year 2008, they would have a serious fucking problem coming up with all the money at the end of the year. So most companies, somebody somewhere in the finance department, I would assume, would know that that's risky, and they're not going to do that. That's probably going to be a blended portfolio or just some bonds, and they're going to make 2 or 3%, 4%, and you don't make it. And also keep in mind that generally they're only getting that on average for half of a year because January through December. Sometimes 401ks can allow you to put up to 100% of your pay. And if you make a lot of money, you can slam it in January, February, and March and get most of the year if you have the luxury of a high income and a company that allows you to put 100% of your income into a 401k. That would make it a little less. But I think the primary reason companies do this, and of course, different companies could have different reasons, but the primary reason is turnover. They're not worried about making 1 or 2 or 3 or 4%. If a company has an average employee tenure of 5 years, the turnover each year, on average, is 20%. And usually one of the provisions they have in the plan is that if you are not an employee on 12/31, at the end of the year, they don't give you anything. You're no longer there. They're not going to pay you out. So in our theoretical scenario, if your income is 100 and you put in 4 and you leave on October 15th, you're not there on 12/31. They don't give you the 4,000. They don't give you the 3,700 that you think you might get from a prorated part of the year. They pay you nothing. That's the big money for the company. If they have a high turnover, which is probably a sign of a bad or unstable company, they can save a lot of money. Again, with the example I gave of 5-year average tenure, if the turnover every year is 20%, that means 20% of the money that they used to have to give to 401k matches, they now don't have to give. And of course, you left the company and you find out months later, you're not getting the match that you thought you were going to get. What are you going to do about it? I don't even know that it's a problem from the company's perspective as far as the laws. I don't know that there's anything requiring them to pay you if you're not there at the end of the year, because that's when they made the match and you didn't work there anymore. So that's some investing things. Again, I ranted way too long. We're going to take a quick break and come back with our interview.
Says slavery has to be considered in context. What's more relative than that? There were people at the time, Thomas Paine, Benjamin Franklin, there were innumerable humanists and secularists who said slavery is evil. The church wouldn't agree. Now, which is it then? Is it that the church is wrong, or, even more suggestive, that God has not yet revealed that it's wrong to them? Or did God support it all those years and then change his mind? From a beginning point of absurdity, you arrive at a terminal point of absolute moral chaos. And I think you've at least done us the favor of making that plain this evening. God, in short, God did not make man in his own image. It is precisely to the contrary. Mammals and primates made many gods and many churches in their own rival images.
All right, ladies and gentlemen, welcome back. Of course, this is Phil Ferguson, and you are still listening to the Phil Ferguson Show. Every once in a while, people gripe at me that I always talk and complain about Christianity. Well, now is your chance to hear something a little different. We're going to talk about Islam and Muslims, and with me today, I have a world-renowned expert, Muhammad Syed. Syed, see, I practiced this before, Syed. My apologies for botching the name. How are you, sir?
Good. How about you?
Yeah, see, I knew I did it before and it was fine, but now it wasn't. But you are one of the founders, if I recall correctly, and you're currently president of Ex-Muslims of North America.
Yes, that's correct.
So it's all of North America. That's pretty big territory, dude. You're president of all that.
Well, as it happens, there's a lot of ex-Muslims around. When we started, it didn't seem that there would be as many as there are. Yeah,
it was 3 of you, and now there's more than 3. As a matter of fact, I was just scrolling through the website, which is exmna.org, exmuslimsofnorthamerica.org, and there's a nice link to The Economist, and apparently the number of ex-Muslims in the United States is growing. What do you know about that?
So Pew survey came out earlier this year that around 23% of those that were raised Muslim have left the faith.
What percentage?
23%, so about 1 in 4.
Wow, that surprises me. And I'm assuming, like any other survey, 23% admitted that they've left the faith, right?
Yeah. So I can't talk about reliably about the survey itself on how they figured out the numbers, but according to Pew, which is one of the most reputable survey firms out there, it's 1 in 4.
Reputable, you mean?
Yeah.
Yeah, reputable.
Yeah.
I knew what you meant.
So that's a number that's you were surprised by it, so was I. We know that, like with atheists in America, Christians that are leaving the faith, it's a growing phenomena, but there was no hard data available about the phenomena within Muslims in America. And having it that high of a number, which is roughly similar to what we're seeing in Christian context, is amazing and very heartening.
Now, was that number of all ages, or was it under a certain age?
They didn't break it down by age. They did do a bit of a breakdown by where people are going afterwards, in the sense of, are people converting to other religions or not?
I see.
And it was 55% of those that are leaving Islam are becoming non-religious.
That makes sense. I mean, it's a lot like, I mean, when people leave fundamentalist Christianity, sometimes they go to Catholicism, sometimes they go to a liberal form of Christianity, but a lot of them just snap out of it.
Yeah, exactly.
And Islam is not always the most liberal kind of thing, is it?
Yeah, so that's why it was shocking to me and you, because people don't generally speak about it. There's a huge stigma against it within Muslim communities. People are ostracized. They lose their friends and families in the Western context. And in the East, of course, you have countries, the governments that go after you. In 13 countries, it's actually illegal with the punishment of death to leave the religion. In other countries that are, quote unquote, more liberal, you go to jail for varying periods of time. So coming out as an atheist, as not believing in Islam anymore, is a huge deal for a lot of people. And that's sort of one of the bigger parts of what we're trying to change, is that context where people feel more comfortable to speak out.
Well, it always spoke to me that if your God needs humans to kill other humans for not believing you, you pretty much suck as a deity. I mean, not only are you capricious kind of dick about it, but you're pathetic because you didn't provide evidence. Do you kind of share my negative attitude, or are you going to be more gentle about it?
Coming from the context of there is no God, and there was this guy in the 7th century that tried to create this ideology to gain a certain amount of power or social change, it makes sense that he would make it very, very difficult to verify his claims because they're false.
Yeah.
And he would make it very, very hard for people to leave because that's his power base.
Right. I like that analogy. That's more realistic. I think mine's kind of cuter and funnier, but yours is probably more based in reality. So you have this group, ex-Muslims of North America, and what do you guys do? You just get around, have a meeting and just stare at each other? Is that what you guys do?
So we've been doing a lot of programs. So the primary larger thrust is we want to change the conversation. We want to change the space we're in right now, where ex-Muslims don't speak out. They're afraid about their families, we need to change the laws internationally. So there's a lot of different pieces of what needs to change. So one of the things we do is we create communities locally around the country, both in the U.S. and Canada, sort of providing support for people and allowing them to move out, allowing them to build a life, allowing them to gain enough support that they speak out. And then the next stage with that is obviously enabling them to speak out. So we have various programs. We're doing a series called Life Beyond Faith. And if you haven't watched it, I highly recommend it. It's on our YouTube channel, where we've interviewed a variety of ex-Muslims that have come from a variety of places around the world, from Somalia, from Lebanon, from Pakistan, from India, and talked about their experiences. And their experiences vary very widely. And that humanizes ex-Muslims in the eyes of people that oppose us. And it's hard. It's easy to hate an unknown entity that is opposing your faith versus a very human, somebody that is suffering due to the faith. So by humanizing ex-Muslims, we're hoping the stigma sort of starts going away, and it also empowers more people to speak out. One of the persons that we profiled, he's a Somali ex-Muslim. He grew up in the DC area where I am based out of, and his family basically abused him, locked him up, beat him up, and he escaped, and he's doing great, and he talked about his experiences. But as a result of him having the courage of speaking out, within days of releasing that video, we had dozens of other ex-Muslims speak out, Somali ex-Muslims, immediately that, okay, I have the same position as this person. I went through similar things, and I'm proud to be an ex-Muslim, and I want it to be recognized. So there's a sort of a network effect where one leads to another, leads to another. There's another person that we profiled, Mahad, who was kidnapped. He was taken he's also from Somalia. He's gay. He's a teenager. He was kidnapped and taken to Kenya for re-education / conversion therapy.
Yeah.
And we were able to rescue him. We got him to the embassy over there and then flew him back to here where he's in college right now. But as a result of us doing a profile on him, putting out that video, BBC did a segment on him, a story on him, and then we've had reports from out of Kenya where local reporters have been covering it, and then as a result, law enforcement has gotten involved, and multiple of these conversion schools have been shut down. So we shouldn't underestimate the amount of change we can actually do.
I love it, and that's the gentleman who's featured in the Economist story I was talking about.
Yeah, he's mentioned in there as well. Yes.
Wow, because I mean, it talks about he had to get up in the middle of the night, sneak into his mother's room to steal back his passport, race outside to a taxi cab to get to the embassy. Right? I mean,
yeah, we had to arrange a taxi cab for him, waiting outside, and the place he was being held in was like a terrorist stronghold. So the person that, another Kenyan atheist that was helping us on the ground, couldn't be seen there because he would be targeted. So he actually arranged two cabs. He was outside in one cab looking at the empty second cab, waiting for Mahat to get out of the place he was, to get into the cab and get to the embassy. So it was a lot more intricate getting him out of there.
Wow. I mean, we need to make some movies of this stuff, right? You know, or a documentary or something.
Yeah, there are tons of harrowing stories like that of what people are going through right now. And it's not like each story we've highlighted in our video series is a tiny example of what's actually going on. Like Mahad was not alone. There are thousands of kids from around the world, from every Western country and even other Eastern countries that are going through this exact same thing. I've spoken to people in Australia and Norway and the Netherlands, and the same with other. So one of the other stories that a person we cover is Stephanie. She converted to Islam. Her children were taken away from her. The children are in Libya now, and her path into and out of Islam is heartbreaking. But she's not alone in that. We get contacted regularly by other people that are going through that. We spoke with a Yemeni guy recently who had left Islam, and as a result, his children were taken away from him. Islamically, your marriage is null and void. Like a Muslim can't be married to an atheist.
Right.
So by default, the marriage is dissolved. So he lost his wife, he lost his children, and then they were trying to kill him as well.
Oh, and there's that.
Yeah.
That is not cool. And like I said, that, you know, what does that say about the deity? Pretending for a moment that a deity exists, that he needs you to go around killing people for him. I mean, he sounds like a mob boss, you know, just trying to maintain his control. It's really, really pathetic, but it's very real for these people all around the world. And it's probably one of the reasons I can't really travel in the Middle East.
Yeah, so for people over here, it's hard to understand the extent of it. People often view the world from their own lenses. Like if you're living in America, you've grown up in America, you see religious oppression as somebody trying to change the laws to favor religion. Religion lost power in the West so long ago that it's very hard for people to understand how damaging it can actually be when the state and mosque or state and church are actually intermixed.
Yeah, I usually say most people live what I call a 15-mile lifestyle, and they don't know what goes on in the world 15 miles from their home, because in 15 miles they can get to a casino, beer, cigarettes, and super Walmart. So, you know, you don't really need anything else. Yeah. But that's a lot of America that I've seen. And this Pew research that says 23% of Americans raised as Muslims no longer identify with the faith. What do you think is the number that has, I mean, you're just guessing, and we're just, you know, it's just me and you talking. No one's listening. What percentage of people have left or no longer identify or aren't active, but still won't even acknowledge it to Pew Research? What do you think? Is that another 1%, or is it like 23% again?
I don't know. Like I wouldn't speculate on that. It could be that the Pew numbers are accurate. What I will say, though, is internationally there are other studies that have come out. There was one in 2014 from Gallup that 5% of people in Saudi Arabia are atheists, and about 20% are non-believers as well, which is roughly similar to what they discovered in America. Yeah. Hopefully over the next few years we'll get similar numbers, or at least data from other countries. So there's no reason to presume that people that are coming from a Muslim context would be substantially different than people coming from a Christian context. In the modern world, we know enough. We understand evolution. We understand the origins of our universe to a great extent. it's hard to believe in these millennia-old myths.
Well, and one of the things that I've thought about is that what is it? In Islam, there's Sunni and Shia, right? That's the two big.
Yeah.
And what's the third? Is it Sufi? Is that?
No, that's more of a mystical subcategory. Sufis exist both within Sunnis and Shias.
Ah, okay. See what I know. But the only way to get Shias and Sunnis to work together is to put some American troops on their soil. So us going into these other countries and fucking around, I don't think that's a good idea. Our time and effort might be better spent parachuting in tens of thousands of laptops that work on solar power or have a hand crank on the back, so more people can surf the internet and see this stuff that we're talking about. Because I think if you have, exposure to the modern world, Islam, just like Christianity, gets harder and harder to accept.
Yeah. The issue is, to a great extent, people have access to a selective amount of knowledge. So again, going back to an American context, if all you're exposed to is Fox News, your world outlook would be very different.
Yeah.
On the other hand, if you have a wide variety of outlets and experiences that you're tapping into, you're well-read, you understand the world to a greater extent, you'll be a more well-rounded individual. And the same sort of dynamic exists within the Muslim world, where due to the fact that governments control information and the religious groups are so powerful and so violent, people don't get a full picture. So I've talked about this before. I grew up in Pakistan, and in 1971, there was a civil war in Pakistan, and it split into two countries, Pakistan and Bangladesh. In that civil war, the Pakistani military went in and killed hundreds of thousands of Bangladeshis. It was an actual genocide. And growing up in Pakistan, I never knew that my country perpetuated genocide within the past generation. And there's no mention of it in textbooks. It's not in the public consciousness. Only when I moved to the West and when I looked stuff up on the internet, I found out that, oh my God, this actually happened. And if you have that level of control, it's hard for people to be able to look outside of whatever they're presented. So one of the roles, instead of sending troops, I would say, is providing the ability and technology for people to break through.
Yeah.
A lot of these countries want to censor information. We can work to prevent that from happening. We can pressure countries to have free speech laws. We can pressure countries to protect activists, be it people working for women's rights or people working for atheism.
Well, I think that's all good, and there's a lot of good information on the internet. Of course, you can also find people who agree with you that the Earth is flat. So everything has its risks, but I can deal with a few people who are silly and think the Earth is flat. If I can get rid of Islam, I'll take that trade off. But that's probably not going to happen really soon, is it?
I don't know about really soon, but I do think it'll happen. But for it to happen, we need to work to make it happen. And whenever we've done anything outward facing, we've always gotten people that have messaged us later saying that we encountered what you were saying, we were angry about it, and we looked into it, and a year later we were an atheist too. So it's often the people need to poke at people who are stuck in some sort of dogma where they're not willing to look beyond it, and just asking them to go look for it, go figure out the truth. You have the information. Tends to go a very, very long way. For a lot of people, they've never encountered honest dialogue that let's try to figure out the truth.
Now, do you guys ever do a conference of your own?
So instead of that, what we've been doing over the past year, that's another program that we launched. It's called Normalizing Dissent, and we've been going around the country to campuses and a few off-campus locations where we're bringing in ex-Muslims and speaking about these issues. And we've had a lot of ex-Muslims attend. We've had Muslims attend as well. And we're sort of trying to get more and more people engaged in the issue. And it's been wonderful.
Well, I think any conversation is better than one side controlling all the information. So that sounds great. And what is secular jihadists?
So there's I don't know if you know of Atheist Republic. It's run by Armin Nawawi. He's the founder, and him and this other ex-Muslim in Toronto, Ali Rizvi, they run a podcast called Secular Jihadists, where they're basically interviewing ex-Muslims from around the world and other opinion makers. Like I think last week they had Masih al-Najad, who runs a page about the hijab within Iran and women fighting back against that. So they're highlighting the global struggle everywhere against Islamic conservatism.
Now, I don't know if you're up to speed on this. Something I've seen lately is that in Iran, women are filming themselves either in their houses without, just with clothes on, but not the hijab, and on the street dancing. What's going on with that?
That simply shows you the level of repression that they have to live under. Simply not having to cover your hair is something that is extreme. Simply dancing and putting something on Instagram is something that is extreme. And that is something that we take for granted. And for them, it's something that they can't do. Often I hear from people that grew up wearing the hijab, and often girls are forced to wear it around the age of 8 or 9. And it's very liberating to not have to do it. So it's a protest movement that's been going on in Iran for the past couple of years where they're pushing back against that. And there are consequences to it. There was one famous incident about 6 months or 8 months ago where somebody in a public square took off her hijab and was holding up a white flag. And this is a part of a protest series that they've been doing. The person that did that, the video went viral, but she was just sentenced to jail for 20 years for taking off her hijab in public and protesting. The sentence came out, I think, 2 days ago.
What country was that in?
Iran.
Oh, God. It's awful.
Another girl posted a video of herself dancing on Instagram, and she was arrested as a result of that. This was a teenager, like 18, 19-year-old girl. So that's sort of what people have to go through in that part of the world.
And she wasn't even in public. It was just a video in her room. I think I saw that video, and she's a pretty good dancer. And she's just having fun with it. It's not anything crazy.
The issue is if you're trying to control women, of course, any display against that, any women standing up against that control is dangerous. So you try to shut it down as soon as you can. And all religions tend to do that. Religions are patriarchal. All of them were started in an era where women were second-class citizens, and they're trying to keep that going.
Well, you obviously don't know about the Shakers. You ever heard of them?
No, I have not.
No, it's an American religion, and men and women were basically equal, and they weren't supposed to intermingle. So when they built compounds and buildings where Shakers lived, the men lived on one side and women lived on the other side, and you weren't supposed to mingle, and so they had no babies, and they died out.
I think I vaguely recall something like that.
So it's one of those things that for a religion to be successful, it's really helpful if it has the right program, if it has the right memes. And one of them we talked about earlier is that you can't get out. Because if people get out and someone sees you get out safely, then they get out. Another one is controlling women and controlling babies and reproduction and making sure that you get more numbers so that over time you can outbreed your competition. And religions that aren't really big on multiplying get smaller and smaller and eventually get pushed out. So these aren't surprises that the really biggest religions, or at least some of them, have these common threads, like Mormonism, and they want you to have
ideas
many
have
babies.
Consequences, and having the idea of women as a vessel for breeding, basically, has consequences. And a lot of Abrahamic religions, I know more about Islam, specifically has that. And as a consequence, there's another study that came out, I think it was also from Pew, about growth trends across the world among religions. And Islam was outpacing every other group because the fertility rate was, I think, 3.5. And there will be more Muslims than Christians than any other group within the next, I think, 30 years. And that's something to be ashamed of for Muslims, because it's a consequence of treating women so poorly and them having so few rights that this happens. Wherever women get economic independence and freedom and ability to make choices for themselves, fertility rates tend to plummet. And the fact that it's not happening in the Muslim world is very damning.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's women's choice over their body, women's education, and you're taking out half the people that can add to your society and help you discover things, invent things, solve problems, and they're just wrapped up in a big black blanket and kept in the dark and not allowed to do anything, and that's horrible.
even if you're allowed to do things, so education has crept in to a great extent. Like the numbers aren't equal at all, but women are getting educated, but they're still made to be financially dependent. So the idea often is that you grow up in your parents' house, and you only leave when you go to your husband's house. You may have an education, but you may not work, or if you work, that money is not available to you. And it's a way of controlling people. So if you don't have economic independence, you can't actually stand up and fight back no matter what's going on. So if you have an abusive husband, you can't get out of the situation if you're not financially independent, if you don't have the ability to take care of yourself. In comparison, liberated women, somebody that, even as a Muslim, say somebody's 18 and they go off to college and then they live on their own and then they get married, that's far more dangerous because they can, if in a bad situation, they can walk out. They know their own worth. They know they can make a living for themselves. They can take care of their children. And that is bad for religion.
Yeah, I was going to say, I want to make sure we're clarified. That's bad for religion, but good for people.
Humanity.
Yeah, and good for kids. What else is ex-Muslims of North America working on that we haven't covered? You've got the website. Do you have Facebook?
One of the things is that that I'm personally very happy about is that we've been pushing more and more outwardly to make Muslims aware of our existence and the work we're doing. And it has started to penetrate in a big way. A few years ago when we started off, it was mostly about there were conspiracy theories around us that we were being funded by Israel, or there's an ulterior motive and people don't really leave Islam. And within the past, I think 4 or 5 years, it's switched dramatically to now Muslims are having conferences and classes on how to fight back against atheism. There was a conference in England last year, Losing Your Religion, where they had imams come in from around the world to talk about how to fight the phenomena of atheism within Muslim communities. I think every week or two, I'm at the moment getting messages from ex-Muslims around the U.S. and Houston and New York, even in Toronto and a few other places, about mosques talking about the problem of atheism of ex-Muslims. And what's hilarious to me is that within most of those contexts, you have Muslims in the audience, ex-Muslims in the audience that are pretending to be Muslim because of their families. And they're telling us, they're texting us live that this is happening, that this imam is speaking out against us. But what happens as a result of that is that imam is speaking out against us. But in the audience, there are ex-Muslims that may have felt that they were alone. That this used to be a very common idea that I'm the only one and I'm crazy for leaving religion. But when the imam is talking about it and is angry about it, you feel wonderful that, okay, not only am I not alone, there are enough of us out there that is riling up this imam.
By the imam complaining about so many people turning against Islam, he is validating people who are turning against Islam.
Exactly. There's a imam, he's based in the UAE. He's originally, I think, from Canada, Bilal Phillips. He's a convert. He's very extreme. He's banned from entering England, I think, due to his views. And he put out a video against ex-Muslims that he was visiting Toronto, and some Muslim family brought an ex-Muslim to see him. And then he saw the same thing happening in the UAE. So he put out a video about the problem. And the people he ran into were people we knew. They talked to us. They are part of our support communities. And so it's hilarious seeing our people being forced by their families to go and speak to these imams, and the imams getting upset and talking about it.
That is great. Now, if I have someone who's listening, because I do have people all over the world that listen, if they're in a Muslim family or they are in a place where they want to leave their faith or their religion, but they have problems, who do they reach out to? Who can they talk to? I'm sure they can't have everybody in the world call you. Is there some kind of support?
We're only based in the U.S. and Canada, so if you're in that area, reach out to us, definitely. Around the world, there are a few other groups. In England, there's Council of Ex-Muslims of Britain and Faith to Faithless that do that kind of work. That's one of our future programs that we're trying to help others replicate our success around the world. And we're hoping in the next few years to have more similar support groups set up in other countries in the West and then eventually in the East as well. So if you want help, look around. There may be other ex-Muslims around. On Reddit, there's an ex-Muslim community. And if not, build one. The way we started was I ran into Sarah Heather, and we thought that this would be something that a lot of people need. And it randomly started that we saw that there was a need for other people to have support, to have help, and people were in trouble, and we tried to remedy that. And there's no reason other people can't replicate that and do that as well.
Now, do you have any chapters or local groups that people can show up to?
We're in about 20 to 25 cities right now around, we're in New York, Chicago, Toronto, Vancouver, most major cities in the US and Canada. And if we're not there, we'll probably be there soon, because we've only been around 4.5 years so far.
I know.
And in that period, we've expanded much faster than I thought was possible.
Well, I think
but the other side of
last time I had you on, it was like 3 or 4 groups. So now it's over 20.
Yeah. So, but ultimately, my hope is to not need those anymore. That's why we've been very aggressively pushing out publicly, is we need to change perceptions within Muslim communities. If somebody's family member leaves the religion, that doesn't mean they're no longer your family member. That means they're no longer deserving of your love. And so Muslim attitudes need to shift. They need to understand when they shun their own family members, when they look down on people based on their disbelief, that is something very bigoted, and that is something within Muslim communities that needs to be remedied, and it needs to be remedied fast. We are growing in number very, very rapidly around the world. So either they can lose a good chunk of their population entirely, or they need to accept us.
I like it. Are there any other programs that we haven't touched on that we want to cover before we wrap up?
There's another one that we're working on, but isn't quite ready for prime time. There's a website that we run right now called Wiki Islam.
Yeah.
And basically it's a wiki of scriptural elements of from the Quran and Hadith that point out the flaws and issues within it. So regarding women's rights, regarding racism, regarding fantastical anti-scientific claims. And it's a wiki, it's a collaborative effort. So one of the things we're working on right now is getting it translated into other languages. It's currently only available in English. So we're hoping to have it in Arabic, Urdu, and a few other languages.
I look forward to hearing about it. When that happens, can you let me know, and I'll be happy to share it on the show.
Yeah, of course.
Well, Muhammad, thank you so much for coming on the show, and I appreciate the work that you and many other people do. Ex-Muslims of North America, exmna.org. Is there an email where someone can contact you to come speak at their group or be on their podcast if they happen to hear you here?
So I was mentioning the Normalizing Dissent tour that we're doing. We have a separate website for that, exmuslimtour.com. And past and future events are listed there with videos. And there's a contact form over there if you want to invite us to your campus or to your local group. I'm available on Twitter at Mo the Atheist, if anybody wants to reach out to me.
Great. Well, thank you for being on the show. It's always great talking to you. Thanks a lot.
Same here. Great talking.
I like reading the Bible. I was reading the Bible, found out Jesus had a little brother. Anybody know his name? James. When I read that, I was like, how much pressure was that? Jesus, your big brother? How many times did you have to hear, why come you can't be more like Jesus, James? Because you know, everybody probably thought that James could do the same thing Jesus could do, but he couldn't. He was just James. He wasn't James Christ. Remember the wedding banquet? Jesus turned water into wine. Everybody was amazed, but they don't tell you about the next banquet. Jesus left early. They started running out of wine. Everybody looked at James. It's like, man, last time this happened, your brother made some wine, dude. You just gonna stand there with your sandals on? You're not gonna... Can you make some Kool-Aid or something? Man, you're not gonna do anything. And you know James had problems just like any other kid had problems. He would try to follow his big brother around. So everywhere Jesus went, James followed him. That's what little brothers do. So if Jesus went there, so did James. I bet one time James almost drowned. Oh, you just got that joke just now, didn't you? Jesus walked on water and James tried to introduce me. I'm sure James had problems. He would go to his parents with his problems. And his parents, especially his mom, was trying to throw him a bone once in a while. They'd pray over their food. They're like, Lord, we just thank you for this food. In James' name. James had problems. He would go to his parents with his problems, and you know what they would say? He'd be like, well, what would Jesus do, you know? Then they gave him a bracelet. And then he started selling those bracelets, you know? Made some money selling bracelets. What would be cool is a what would James do bracelet, right? Same initials, different meaning. Completely different meaning. You driving down the street, you get cut off in traffic. You fuss him out, your pastor gonna be like, yo, you got a what would Jesus do bracelet on? You're like, that's what would James do. Driving an imaginary car for a long time, isn't he? Also found out when Jesus was 12 years old, Mary and Joseph lost Jesus. They lost Jesus. And you know the first thing they had to do was pray. I wonder what that prayer must have sounded like. Joseph probably did the prayer. He was like, oh, God. Dear God, oh, forgiving God. You remember that Messiah you gave us? You got another one somewhere, man? We don't. That was the only begotten son? Okay, we're going to find him. We're going to find him.
You're listening to The Bill Ferguson Show.
Once again, I want to thank you for listening to the show. The ending here is going to be kind of short because I'm kind of busy right now. So I got to get back to work, even though I have so much fun doing this. I also will be at SciCon, which is CFI's conference in Las Vegas. That's in mid-late October. Go check it out. It's going to be fun. Great speakers are going to be there. And then a couple of weeks later, I'm going to be in San Francisco for the FFRF convention. And my wife and I are going to both of those. And we thought instead of flying back and forth from Chicago, we're going to spend the time between the two conferences, about 7 to 10 days, going from Seattle. We're going to fly from Vegas to Seattle and driving down the coast to San Francisco. So we're looking forward to having that adventure. So we're going to do that. And so during that time frame, I might not put out a show, or like I said, I might make some kind of show that's, a best of show. Other podcasts do that. Maybe I can do that too. No reviews to read this week. So if you like the show and you're getting value out of it, one of the things that you can do is leave a review. The only two places I know are iTunes and Stitcher. So if you can leave a 5-star review in one of those places, it would be very helpful. It lends credibility to the show so more people can find it. Because if a show has 2 episodes and no reviews, that people know it's brand new. In this case, we're on show 270, and there's 211 reviews at iTunes, so someone could see that and go, wow, this is actually like a legitimate kind of show. So they might actually listen to it and get the benefit. So that's something you can do to help me. The other thing that we've talked about, and we're going to keep talking about it, for July, August, and September only. So this is a limited time thing. I'm doing a match for money that we are raising. We, meaning Phil and my listeners, however many they are, because the data on podcast listens is tricky. I'm going to match up to $10,000 of whatever you guys give. And it doesn't have to be a listener. You can share this with a friend. You can put it on Facebook groups. You can share it in your podcast. You can disseminate this any way you want legally. I don't care where the money comes from. I just want the Secular Student Alliance to get a whole bunch of money. So the website you can go to, if you've not done this already, please go do this. We're only going to do this for a couple of months. And it's a weird thing. I'm not asking you for money, which I think you should support other podcasts and blogs through Patreon and other sources, because this stuff takes time. But what I want you to do for me is to contribute to the Secular Student Alliance. And the link is bit.ly/Phil Matches. Capital P-H, well, capital P, H-I-L, capital M-A-T-C-H-E-S. Matches. Phil Matches. bit.ly/Phil Matches. I'm pretty sure you need the capital P and the capital M. If someone finds that it works without those, let me know so I can stop saying it, because I don't want to be wrong. But you can go there, and we're trying to collect monthly contributions. So think about your budget. I don't want you to break anything, but if you can only give $3 a month, sign up for $3 a month. You can pick one of the levels that is there, or you can create your own dollar amount. Put in $3, put in $20. If things are going really well for you, or you think that you've gotten a lot of value from this podcast, go put in $500 a month. I don't care. Bigger is better. Put in as much money as makes you feel good that you're doing something to save the world, and it needs some saving. So go to that web link at the Secular Student Alliance, put in the money. When the entire 3-month period is over, we're going to look at the amount that's donated per month, extrapolate that out for 12 months, and whatever that amount is, up to $10,000, I am going to match it. Me and Polaris, as part of my program where I tithe, my business tithes, 10% of the gross revenue every year goes to supporting the secular movement. And this is one of the things earlier in the year, we gave $6,000 to American Atheists to bring in 200 new members. And they made that way ahead of schedule. So hopefully we can do the same thing here, but it goes for 3 months. bit.ly/Phil Matches, capital P, capital M. Go give some money, and we'll have fun with that. So I'm going to wrap up the show. Thank you. Thank you so much for listening. Thank you for sharing. Thank you for the kind emails. And again, everyone that sent me information about food, diet, health, I do thank you. It really is meaningful. I'm just going to take a break from getting those emails, so give me a few weeks before you send me anything else. Thank you for listening, and I hope to see you either in Las Vegas or San Francisco coming up. Until then, ciao.